Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'm playing with a couple supplies. Arteza sent me a second package, which I shared in an unboxing video the other day. Now we're going to try out a few things. They asked for my honest opinion, so here we go. You can see I've already played with this one because the bristles are stained. I'll be using the miniature brush set, which is 15 brushes in different sizes. The biggest one seems to be a size 1, while the smallest are about 4-0. They're white Taclon, which is good for use with acrylics and watercolors. There are a few different shapes of brushes. The long ones are liners, while the thicker, chunkier ones are spot brushes, and the short, narrow ones are round. For paint, I'll be using Arteza's metallic acrylics. I would have reviewed these in conjunction with the normal acrylics I already looked at, but I didn't have them yet. I got these later. Fortunately, or unfortunately, metallics don't really get used the same way in face-ups, so we'll talk a bit about using metallics and how these perform today. The metallics have the same labeling as the other paints, with opacity and light fastness, as well as what pigment is used. You can see every single tube says mica. That's because mica is the most common reflective pigment, and it comes in a wide variety of colors. I swatched these paints on a card alongside the regular acrylics. The regular ones are on the left and the new metallics are on the right. You'll see right away that a lot of them are a little thin looking, which is unfortunately extremely common with metallic paints in general. I've found very few metallics that have good coverage in a single layer. Somewhat noteworthy is that only the top few colors are actually labeled metallic, because, well, we don't really have orange or purple metals, do we? So most of these are labeled as pearl colors. Most of the colors in this set of 12 are warm. There is a nice cool white though, which is nice because most pearl whites tend to look a little more ivory. I'll be testing on Robin as usual, my DFA practice head. But before I get started, I felt it was important to point out that I did a bad job of cleaning last time, so there's some hazing in the doll's sealant where I didn't get all the old sealant off before I sprayed a new layer. So if you notice some weird grayish ghosting on the doll's face while I'm painting, that's what that is. Most of the colors are pretty comparable in texture, so I'll focus on 3 today. Since I'm reviewing the brushes as well, I wanted to take a second to show that the bristles on these are nice and snappy, which I personally like for fine brushes. They're still soft enough that they work best with thin paints, but springy enough that I feel they hold their shape well. So when working with metallics and face-ups, they're not thinned to that inky consistency we use for hair and fine details. Metallics are problematic paints, and that's unfortunately true of pretty much any brand you'll come across. The mica used for pigment is so heavy that it easily separates from the binder. That means thinning isn't ideal, so we opt for a thick, heavy coat with as thick of paint as we can handle to ensure good coverage. This liner brush does an awesome job along the upper lid, by the way. The only problem with a heavy layer of acrylics is that you get a lot of texture that way, and it can be harder to control it. So I add just a tiny bit of flow aid to my paint. I'm using just a single drop of thinner and a single drop of paint. It's just enough to cut the viscosity. This definitely flows better, but you can see the separation in that first stroke. I cannot freehand anything to save my life, so forgive the mess I'm about to make. When working with metallics, it's a good idea to go over the lines a few times and use as much paint as you can without having it bead up or run off. With 2 layers, this gold is okay, but I've got some more thoughts I want to share on that later. The white, which was the most translucent when I tested it on paper, unfortunately doesn't work as well, either straight or with the flow aid added. Since I felt it was really streaky and clumpy, I thought maybe I wasn't loading the brush well, so I decided to test the brush. I grabbed a black watercolor I had handy and tried the same brush. The watercolor went on fine, and I'm actually pretty impressed with how much color load these tiny brushes can handle. They give really nice, smooth lines. I think they'd probably work well even for lashes if I were using the right paint for it, but I used regular water for this watercolor and not the flow aid, so it doesn't go on as smoothly as lashes ought to. That's my bad, and I'll revisit these brushes with watercolors another time. So the brushes are fine. It seems the white is just too translucent to get as much color laid down as I like. In the spirit of fairness, the opacity rating on the white paint does indicate that it is supposed to be more translucent. So we're going to try the space gray as well, since it's labeled as being more opaque. It's interesting to note that there are only 2 tubes of paint with high opacity ratings. I wish there were more ratings than just a full box for good coverage and a half box for more translucency, because there are miles of difference between the coverage in the gold and in the white, but they have the same rating. Trial and error is necessary for these, I guess. The opacity of the space gray when used straight is impressive. I wouldn't need more than a single coat with this one. When I add a bit of flow aid, it pretty much cuts that opacity in half though. I can still get nice coverage, but it works similarly to the gold now, where I need 2 layers to make it look good. So these are definitely workable paints, but they're not my first choice, and I'm not sure what the difference is that makes the acrylics so much more difficult. And by that I mean difficult compared to the gouache. For sake of reference, I'm going to pull out the Arteza gouache, which I reviewed previously. The gouache really impressed me. It also comes in pearls and metallics, though there are fewer colors, and the only white is actually the exact same color as Robin's face, which I did not expect. So instead, I'll grab the gold for comparison. The gold gouache is pretty much the exact same color, but whether I apply it straight, like I do at first, or thinned, like when I add the little arch over the top, the opacity stays exactly the same, and I get excellent coverage in just one layer. I guess it's because of the additional chalk content in the gouache paint, but it seems like the gouache metallics are superior in everything except range of colors, where the acrylics still have them beat. So while the acrylics aren't bad, and they actually seem pretty nice for conventional painting, I say if you're doing face-ups, get the gouache, because it'll do everything you need in a face-up and do it better. The acrylics come in a beautiful assortment of colors, but they're best kept for the canvas. The real star of this particular experience has been the brushes. I'm really happy with these, and I go through a lot of brushes, so I'm happy to have them. The bristles do stain easily, which makes it harder to see if they're really clean. The one that I turned purple has been doused with brush cleaner, but I guess it's going to be purple forever now. But the texture is great, and I feel I'm able to get really nice lines. This watercolor would be super with these brushes if I'd used flow aid. When I try the liner on paper, I find the lines I'm able to get are really crisp. The bristles stay together nicely, and the line weights and edges are really consistent. The finer brushes in the set should be usable for lashes on 1/3 and 1/4 scale dolls with the right paints. And the thicker brushes are excellent for things like scroll work and eyeliner. And since I'm a serial brush abuser, the pack working out to $1 a brush makes me cry a little less when I think of how many I'm gonna wreck in the future. So in closing, the brushes seem great. The metallic acrylics are okay, but ultimately, I feel the gouache gives better results in this particular application. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.